John Anthony at Sustainable Freedom Lab in Ottawa is doing yeoman's work in the marketplace, trying to bring a kind of market accountability to organisms which are unused to that and have seemingly unlimited access or access to unlimited funding, namely the Department of Housing and Urban Development. John is an expert in planning and has become something of is a national speaker on how people in cities and towns across the U.S. can understand planning and thwart efforts to centralize and externalize control over what happens in the city, the authority taken away from local people, local government, and given to bureaucrats and attorneys and lawsuits. John, you have a new program that you've helped initiate. It's called the Miss Mary Project. It's a project that we want to hear more about because it has a very human and very warm-hearted goal and practice. What's it all about, John Anthony?
Well, thank you, David. Thanks a lot for having me on. Yeah, the Miss Mary Project is very different from what I've been doing in the past, but it's actually very much related to it. It's about helping low-income families not just get a job, not just get a leg up so they can kind of claw their way out of poverty, but it's actually doing something to allow people to help to become financially successful, to gain wealth for themselves, really have a substantially better way of life. And I think that starts at the grassroots level. And where this all came from is I've spent nearly a decade studying different federal agencies and how they function with local communities. I spent a lot of time on HUD. I was just in Washington, D.C., or in Arlington, Virginia, actually, and gave a speech. There were some HUD representatives there, some people from the Department of Transportation. And one thing I found is a lot of what drives these programs is probably a genuine desire to help low-income Americans. But the question is, are we really succeeding at that? If you go back to 1965, between then and now, the poverty rate in America has been between an 11 and 15%, and it has not budged from that. And if you look at, if you take minority families, like African Americans and Hispanic community, it ranges from anywhere from 23 to 26%. So we're really not doing that much, though we're giving a lot, and we need to keep doing that. I want to make that clear. We need to be able to provide that net for people and continue to do that. But we're really not busting out of those metrics. Now, you'll see metrics out there that say, oh, no, but it's really not as bad as it seems. Well, the way they make it seem not so bad is they add in all the welfare benefits that they pay. So that's like saying my next door neighbor gave me $1,000 this month, and if he keeps doing that, I won't be poor anymore. So that's not a sustainable program. So the Miss Mary Project is really an outcome of that. I've also, over the past year, traveled around the country, and I've studied grassroots initiatives that are successful. One in particular in Wisconsin, they actually have 50% of the people that this local church works with getting jobs with anywhere from 30 to 60 days. These people have got a job, and I don't mean just a minimum wage job. They've got jobs paying $15, $20, $22 and up. Some cases they've got profit sharing of $1,000 or $1,100 that's kicking in after 3 to 6 months, and they've even got long-term wealth that's accumulating for themselves. So we're talking about substantial jobs. So what I've done is taken the best of these different programs around the country, and we've designed the Miss Mary Project. Now, what I did for 30 years in my business, Corporate Measures, I go into major companies and smaller organizations, and I teach leadership training. I teach people how to advance on the job, how not just to get through the door, but how to advance once they're in the door. That same skill is what I take to people, but in low-income areas.
Well, tell my listeners just quickly, John Anthony, what the main components of that skill are. What are the 4 or 5 main concepts that bring that
Sure.
To someone to make it valuable for them?
Well, in order to have a really good job, first of all, you've got to have the training and the education. You have to have some kind of a skill. There has to be a job availability, but you've also got to be able to get to that job. There's a lot of people in low-income families. We talk about, boy, why don't they get a job? Well, what if they have a car that's broken down and they need brakes for $300 and they don't have $300 to get the brakes? So guess what? They're not going to be able to get to that job. Or what if they don't even have a car, let alone one without brakes on it? So there needs to be a way to provide for the whole person, and that's what we do. In our training program, we train people not just the basic stuff, how to get a job, how to go through a hiring interview, and what to say, when you're in when you're in front of the HR manager. So we teach them all those skills. And by the way, we used to teach the HR managers what to say, so we know exactly what they want, what it is that these people are looking for. So we provide that information, but beyond that, we show people what do we do when we walk through the door that will separate me as an employee from everyone else in that company? How can I become better? How can I become a go-to person so that I don't just get the job, but I advance on the job? So I start thinking about raises. I start thinking about bonus and profit sharing and larger money down the road. That's what we prepare people for. And we've been very fortunate. Over the years, we've worked with a lot of different large consulting groups. And recently, we're talking to people at KPMG. So we know that in this digital world out there, we have this new whole entity opening up called the digital marketplace, the digital workplace. Well, how are you prepared? How do you train for the digital workplace? Well, we know exactly what these people are looking for because KPMG is writing the books on that, and we're right there and see what those books are. So we bring that training into the community so that low-income families have an opportunity to take advantage of that. So if they just want to get through the door, we can do that. If they want to prepare themselves to advance when they get in the job, we can start talking about bigger money, bigger dreams. And if they're trying to get better training, then we have ways to connect them. There's many facilities here. You've got the TCAP program over at Chattanooga Community College. Training program. You can learn anything from marine mechanics, how to fix car engines. You can fit hairdressing if you want to become a hairstylist. There's a whole range of programs that are offered right here in Chattanooga, and they're available for low-income families.
Just backing up a second, John Anthony, we do thank you for joining us. This is David Tulis, and John Anthony runs the Sustainable Freedom Lab in Ooltewah. The question I had about the job applicant who has ambitions for going further, how does he show in an interview or in the initial stages of finding work that he has this thing that I would say really is a kind of these are examples of character. Yes. How does he show those? And then can you be specific as to what those character traits are? How does he get those character? Yes. How does he get them? Can you nail it down to like 3 points that are the character issues that are not necessarily trainable?
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, if you look at somebody who is success-oriented, they've got a mindset that says, I'm going to be becoming successful. This is something that they've developed over years. It doesn't just, happen out of nowhere. And when they walk into a job interview, there's a certain confidence that they have. Well, there's a physiology to confidence. So we show people how to gain that confidence, how to have that confidence for yourself. If you don't have that, you're not going to do very well. You might get the job, but it's not likely you're really going to advance on that job. And can you create confidence? Yes, you absolutely can. Science has shown that. We've done it, and I've done it with people myself over 30 years that were completely lacking in that. We show them how to develop that. Another one is an attitude that you can overcome the failures and the negativities and the barriers that come your way. They are always going to come your way, whether it's on the job, whether it's at home, whether it's just getting in the car and getting to the job. There's always going to be a barrier there. Well, do you know that there's ways to overcome those? When I came here this morning, an interesting thing happened. I had to be here at 10:30 because David said get here for the show at 10:30. I says okay, so I'm driving along and it's like 10:15, and all of a sudden a tree falls down in front of my car. So here I am driving along Harrison Pike. This tree falls over in front of me as I'm stopped. Car behind me, the gal going in the opposite direction, she was stopped. But what we did was I immediately hopped out of the car, motioned to the person coming the other direction, and say, "Hey, listen, between you and I, we can get rid of this thing." And we did. It was really community teamwork coming together. But you know what? I never doubted for 1 second that we were going to get that tree out of there. The car would go forward, and I was going to be here. I covered the base. I did call you. I said I might be a little bit late, but in the end, we all made it work. Well, where does that come from? That comes from an inner sense of confidence, and it's not always there. Sometimes I'm very uncertain. I'm frightened and nervous about things. That happens. But I can make that all go away in a matter of minutes. So we teach people how to do that. We teach people about responsibility and accountability. Those are big things in the workplace today. How many times is there a piece of paper or a scrap metal laying on the floor and a worker just walks around it and lets it stay there? And at the end of the day, it's still there. Well, our people don't do that. They're trained. They see something, they take care of it and accept the responsibility. A big thing today is collaboration, and then there's adaptability. How can we adapt to the change that's in these organizations? Because we don't know what may be coming down the pike. So that goes together with the confidence. So all those skills that companies are needing, that they're most looking for, we provide that right in the basic training of our program. So our graduates are advanced enough to get in there and begin to look for advancement.
Now, is there a city, John Anthony, in which the Miss Mary concept has already been put into effect?
Yeah, well, actually, we're starting it right here. We're not here yet. We're starting right now in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And also in Greenville, South Carolina, and we're working with other communities around the country where they have similar programs. I was just working with someone yesterday in Colorado and also up in Milwaukee. But right now we're trying to get this to launch a program right here in Chattanooga. Now, a piece that I left out, a very fundamental component, are churches, because we work with churches. Churches are in the communities where low-income families are, and they know who these people are. And we believe that in order to be successful, we don't need the government to be the center of community life. We need the church to be the center of community life. So we work with the pastors in the churches. We work with the members of the congregation. We begin to identify people, or they identify themselves, who want to grow, and then we work with them. It's through the churches that we provide the transportation. So we pay for the transportation to get back and forth to the job until people can get on their feet. But the church becomes the center of everything. So what we're looking for here in the Chattanooga area to really get this thing up and successful. We've made lots of connections with companies and so on who are interested, but we need churches. So if some of your viewers like this idea of really helping the low-income families to do well, not just to kind of to muddle on through, then please give us a call. There's our website, and it's missmaryproject.org. It's missmaryproject.org, and there's a phone number at the bottom of the page. Please call or just email us and let us know that your church is interested in participating in this, because we'd love to have you on board.
And you're thinking of the church, John Anthony, is because the church for many people is their only real community. They have job, yes. They may have a team where a son or daughter plays. Those are networks, and there's a difference between a network and a community. Church may also be a network for many people who just come to the service and then leave, but for many others, the church does have that function of community, which is community is communing, living together, looking together, working out problems together, having time spent together, doing projects together. That's what community is. And there, you're saying that the church network, the church community, if it does exist in a particular body, is better for the poor person who needs a hand, yes, than a government office.
Far better. I mean, government, it's not that there aren't good people in government. There are, and I've met them. It's not that there aren't caring and loving people. They are. But there's also a lot of politics takes place in government. There's a lot of self-interest and hidden agendas and all kinds in any government. And I'm not talking Republican or Democrat. I'm talking all of them. I've watched these things for years. So what we need to do is get all that stuff out of there. And we need to get it down to the point where we have a grassroots uprising of people who want to be successful. You know, if you look at the most untapped resource we have in America today, it's our low-income families, because we've got brain power there. And that brain power is idly sitting, well, it's not sitting there idly, it's struggling to survive. The heating bill, how do we keep the lights on in our home today? How do I put food in my family's mouths? When you're struggling with those things, how do I pay my credit card bills? When you're struggling with that, then you can't really be thinking about getting ahead, and it's in getting ahead that society wins.
So my listener is John Anthony, the man who matters, as I like to say. What's better for an effort like this, that he give, let's say, 10 hours of his time over the course of 30 days, or is it better that he give $1,000? What is really needed from him more of those two options?
Well, we need both of those things, really. It takes money to make these things work. So we do hope that if you like what you hear and you like what we're doing with the Miss Mary Project, and we are going to take this nationally, by the way, we have programs to roll this out in all 50 states. We do need donations. And if you go on our website or on a cell phone, you'll see a little donate button there. We would certainly appreciate any donations that you guys can send, whether it's $100, $1,000, or $10.
And MissMaryProject.org is that a C3 or a C4?
It's a C3. Yes, okay. Everything is
nonprofit charity.
We're a nonprofit charity organization. Everything is 100% tax deductible. But we also need people. Right now, I do training. I write training programs. I deliver training programs to help people. But we're going to need in each of these communities trainers. We need drivers. There's a whole host of people we're going to need to help us make this thing successful. So we offer these services to community members for free. We don't want them to have to pay anything to be able to get there. We want to be able to provide all the basis for them. And we want them to keep the benefits they have right now. But we want to be the bridge that takes them out of dependence and into success.
On the Miss Mary Project website, John Anthony, you mentioned that HUD, and one of the headlines says, HUD needs faith initiatives to shrink poverty. And say a bit more about the official perspective of that organization. How does it view these private efforts? Is it somehow threatened by them? Does it somehow not like them or disfavor them?
It really depends on who you talk to. I mean, you go back to the HUD. HUD has faith-based initiatives, and on the surface, that sounds like a really good thing. But in many cases, if you look at the bylaws of HUD, you dig into their website, really what it does is it diminishes the value of faith in the faith-based operation. It's more about HUD and what they want to do than it is about faith-based. Now, they do listening to communities to get feedback and so forth. But ultimately, it's still run by this gigantic behemoth that is not really as sensitive as it needs to be to what it is that the local community needs.
And it seems to me also from your broad work in this context, John Anthony, that HUD, as you say, views things that are unequal as discriminatory. So if you have unequal incomes in a particular part of town, it views that as the result of discrimination. And so it says we righteous organization of Uncle Sam, we have to make things right. And so it deals with by litigation and by threats of force to make things happen its way, and that seems to be.
Well, this is what this new program, Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing, that came out in July of 2015. And I don't want to go too much. I've spent so much of my life, and by so much I mean 90 to 100 hours a week, just focusing on this. I could spout this stuff in my sleep. And maybe this was well intentioned, but the fact is, Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing does a tremendous amount of damage, along with the good that it does do. And you have to look at the overall picture. If I'm adding 5 and I'm taking 5 away, where am I getting? I'm getting nowhere. And that's what Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing does. It's like a bludgeon that legally forces communities to change zoning laws to relocate people where HUD, in their wisdom, has deemed that they're going to do better economically if we move them there. That doesn't always work out that way, but HUD looks at the averages. Well, on average it may. Well, what about all the people that it didn't help? So we really have to stop worrying about averages and start worrying about people and get right down in the places where these people live, give them a hand, and look at people as resources, assets to the community, as an opportunity for growth, and not look at them as some laboratory experiment.
Will federal grants be part of the toolkit for the Miss Mary Project, John Anthony?
Many federal grants come with strings attached. We avoid those at all costs. So we stay away from HUD grants that are going to have strings attached that force us into one direction or another.
The name of the effort, John Anthony, seems really kind of whimsical. Miss Mary. Now, why is there a story behind that name?
There's a long story. Let me try to shorten down. Miss Mary was a wooden boat built back in 1922 as a racer that lost every race. I mean, it wasn't a very nice-looking wooden boat. The grain didn't match. The wood didn't match. The first 3 races it came in, it dropped dead last in the first one, and the engine blew up before it finished the other 2. So basically, it was considered a loser. And wooden racing boats back then were only good for 2 or 3 years, and then they pretty much went into dry dock because the bottom was wrecked. This boat was picked up about 9 years after it was created, and just by 2 people that loved it and cared for it and wanted to develop it. It became one of the fastest boats in the racing world at the time, in its class back in the 20s and the 30s. It received the American Powerboat Association Cup, went in front of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the driver and the owner, receiving a Gold Cup award, President's Cup, for being the fastest boat out there. It just turned out to be a real hero. So the point was that this was a boat that looked like it was going to go nowhere, and it had the spirit of a winner. We believe the same thing for people in low-income families. Maybe it looks like they're stuck on a dead-end street nowhere, but we think there's a spirit and a soul that can fly, and the job of Miss Mary Project is to help people fly.
We hear a lot in Chattanooga about gang members, John. They were told by the police that there are 1,300 members. I think that the system, the grid that lets that label be applied to someone is very easy. It's a very low standard. So I think the number is probably far bigger than the real threat of a gang membership among young people. The question, I guess, is for you on this question is: Are programs such as the Miss Mary Project able to touch the lives of these young men, mostly who are drawn into this affiliation with gangs? And how would that work?
Yeah, let me just answer that. There's no program born anywhere, government, non-government, that can solve every problem. You simply can't do it. But you try to put the odds in your favor. Now, exactly what you're talking about. We had a young man up in Wisconsin that I met recently. This young gentleman had just gotten out of prison. He had gotten a job at McDonald's making minimum wage, and really wasn't not even making minimum wage. He wasn't making ends meet. That young man went through a program very similar to what we're doing down here. In fact, the people who developed that program are working with me to help me develop an even bigger and better program here. Within 2 months of going through the training program. He had a wonderful job paying over $22.50 an hour. He's getting bonuses on his job. He got, I believe it was an $1,100 bonus check that he's got very recently. And he also has a 401k going ahead, building for the future. This young man is now talking about not going back to prison, not running with gangs, but writing a book. In fact, he's working on that. So will every story turn out like that? Well, of course it's not. But we can get enough of them to make a difference, and they begin to influence other people in their community. The best influence of somebody in your community is somebody else in your community, because they have credibility. It's your mom, it's your dad, it's people who are moving up the ladder.
Is the theme in Miss Mary Project employment, or is it maybe a little broader to include entrepreneurship?
We would like to see entrepreneurship. We think there's a lot of creativity that's just completely untapped. You know, it's not just these guys born to rich families that, you know, that develop these software programs and suddenly they're billionaires overnight. There's ideas just as good as that down in concentrated areas of poverty, because I've been there and I've talked with people on the front porch, and they've got phenomenal ideas, but they don't think they can go anywhere. Well, we want to try to help these people go somewhere. So the Miss Mary Project becomes a community hub to tie all the pieces together with the church as the center of the activity, to tie all the pieces together. If you need training, we can get you there. You need transportation to the job, we can get you there. You need to get a job interview? Well, you got to do a good job, but we will be working through local congressmen and senators. In fact, we're meeting with Congressman Chuck Fleischman on Monday to discuss exactly this program. And the idea is so that companies will then open their eyes and say, well, let's see what's going on over here with these people who went through that Miss Mary Project training. Maybe they'll be better employees. And that's our ultimate goal. And when they get in the job, to get promoted.
One of my arguments for local economy, John Anthony, is that we have a local capital pool and investment hub where it's loco-centrically oriented. If you're in Chattanooga or Hamilton County, you put capital into a fund that's managed by someone who's on a payroll, perhaps, and that money is invested in micro loans or micro investments in local companies, local businesses. That the shareholder of this entity has the prospect of an increase, and he's putting his money out there to work in the economy. Because it's one thing to save money, you know, save gold and silver. It's another thing to put money at risk out into the economy where people can use it to build equity in a small business. So maybe at some point capital investment could come into this theory and program of yours.
I think we can. I mean, we're wide open to all ideas, but you have to crawl before you run. I mean, we'd love to see entrepreneurs, and I've seen them in classes already, young men and women coming up with brilliant ideas for how they can change the industries. But right now, we just want to get them jobs, and we want to get them on a trajectory for financial success. You know, the only affordable house is one you can afford to pay for. So if that house is $400,000 or $500,000, then we want to put people in a position where they can afford to pay for it.
Well, John Anthony, you run Sustainable Freedom Lab, and we're talking about the Miss Mary Jobs Project. And again, for my listener now has this pen in hand. What is the website? Give it a couple of times.
Yeah, if you'll go to missmaryproject.org, that's missmaryproject.org. You'll learn all about our project. There's a little videotape there. And if you can donate, we'd really appreciate it.
This is David Tulis. And John, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Make sure you keep it here at Nooga Radio. We argue for loving your neighbor and buying local. I think that near is better than far, small better than big, and simple than complex. And in the footnotes, we fight also at 5-point type, sans serif, probably Helvetica, that personal is better than corporate and physical than abstract. We're brought to you by Nooganomics.com, the website for the man who matters. Nooganomics.com. Keep it tuned here. And now, some important messages.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader, Nooga Radio.